Hello, everyone. We are live at lunch here with Abigail Molina, Molina Immigration, where we melt the fear of ICE. Soy la abogada Abigail Molina con Molina Immigration, donde transformamos vidas y brindamos alas. Vamos a estar hablando hoy sobre el nuevo ley que está en proceso, que imagino que esta semana o la próxima va a llegar a ser ley, o a lo mejor cuando entre Trump va a llegar a ser ley. Entonces vamos a estar hablando de qué se trata y cuáles van a ser las consecuencias para las personas indocumentadas. All right, we're going to be talking today about the Laken Riley Act. And if you are unaware of what that is, I'm going to be explaining what the consequences are going to be for undocumented individuals here in the U.S. and when that's likely to take effect, and what you should do if you fall under that category. So Laken Riley is a young woman, 22 years old in Georgia, who was brutally murdered by an undocumented individual, a young man from Venezuela, 26-year-old from Venezuela. This happened in February of 2024, so not too long ago, but it made, obviously it made the news, and a lot of people had some very strong feelings about the situation. Obviously, it's a horrible thing that happened to this young woman and her family. I don't want to make light of that. But I do think it is important to put it into context, because these are the kinds of events that are being highlighted to support this opinion. This how would you say? What is the word when there is like a bias towards a group, and so it's horrific events like this where people use it to say, see, that's why we need to crack down on undocumented immigrants. And I can understand the emotion behind it, but what frustrates me is that it's taken completely out of context. Is it horrible what happened? Yes, absolutely. And like I said, I don't want to make light of that, but I do think that it is important to recognize that undocumented immigrants are not the only ones who are committing murders in our country. And I believe, and I've seen that the statistics just do not support that undocumented immigrants commit more crimes than U.S. citizens. It's in fact the opposite. But like I said, these are used as like an example, Exhibit A, why we need to crack down on undocumented immigrants. And so let's dig into it a little bit. This is legislation that was introduced. This is like the first thing that's passed the House of Representatives. It just passed yesterday, January 7th. It still needs to go through the Senate, but I don't have any expectation that it will have, that it won't pass. I believe it will pass. I don't know if Biden will sign it. It might need to wait until Trump takes office, but that is literally like 12 days away, right? We are 12 days away from Trump taking office. So I don't anticipate that it will that it won't become law. It will definitely become law. I shouldn't say definitely. I don't know. I can't predict the future, but just in our political climate right now, I see that it should and probably will become law. So let's talk about what that legislation says, who it's going to impact. But for now, I'm going to take a break and go into Spanish. Entonces voy a explicar lo que acabo de decir. Estoy hablando de una nueva legislación que pasó por la Casa de Representantes ayer, el 7 de enero de 2025. Y creo que esa legislación es un ejemplo de qué se puede pasar cuando hay personas que se sienten algo contra inmigrantes y quieren buscar un ejemplo de algo horrible para apoyar su sentir de que debemos de deportar a todos los inmigrantes indocumentados. Entonces, en febrero de 2024 había un asesino muy horrible, muy mal, de una muchacha de 22 años en Georgia. Ella estaba corriendo y un inmigrante indocumentado de 26 años, él es de Venezuela, lo mató a ella. Entonces, ahora hay legislación bajo su nombre. Ella se llamaba Laken Riley. Entonces, esta legislación trae su nombre de ella porque ella, porque quieren honrar a ella y usarlo como un ejemplo de por qué se necesita poner una nueva legislación contra inmigrantes indocumentados. Entonces, vamos a estar hablando de qué se trata esa ley que ya pasó por la Casa de Representantes y creo que también va a pasar por el Senado. No sé cuándo, tal vez van a esperar hasta que Trump llega a tomar su lugar en 12 días. Solo falta 12 días para que Trump toma su lugar. So we're talking about the Laken Riley Act today that just passed the House of Representatives yesterday, January 7th. And like I was saying, this is really an example of a way that people make an example of a horrific situation, taken out of context to make it appear that this is a really big problem. So, and forgive me, I find it humorous. And I know, and again, I don't want to make light of her death because it is horrible. But this individual who murdered her, 26-year-old Venezuelan, undocumented, had previously been arrested for shoplifting. Not a serious crime. And somehow now shoplifting is being associated or connected to the potential that somebody will commit murder. And so this act focuses directly on theft crimes, all theft crimes, but especially including shoplifting. And this act will require mandatory detention for anyone with any theft, not just a conviction, but an arrest. So a suspicion of theft, all levels, including shoplifting. And shoplifting is usually a minor offense, right? Not something that you should be deported for. And in fact, it does fall under an exception usually. But now under this act, anyone who has committed any theft crime, including shoplifting, will be required to be detained. Mandatory detention means that you're not eligible for a bond from immigration, so you're going to be detained while your deportation process is in process. So as I was saying, shoplifting is usually a minor offense, one that, does not require that you stay detained while you're going through your deportation process, but this act will make it such. And not just convictions, but anyone who's been arrested. So again, it's when I first heard about this yesterday, I was like, what does theft have to do with anything, really? And why are they focused on that? But when you look at the history of the murder of Laken Riley, and the fact that that undocumented immigrant had been arrested for shoplifting, then you see the connection. So what does this mean? This means that once this gets signed into law, it still needs to be go through the Senate and then be signed by the president. I don't know if this will actually happen before Trump takes office, but we're only 12 days away from Trump taking office. So probably this will be one of the first things. If Biden does not sign it, definitely Trump will sign it, and this will go into effect. And it means then that anyone who has been arrested for any theft, even down into shoplifting, will be required, ICE will be required to detain those individuals while they go through the deportation process. And anyone who has any family who's ever been detained by immigration knows that the longer somebody stays detained with immigration, the more likely it is that they're going to be deported, either just choosing to end the process early because they don't want to stay deported, they don't want to stay detained, or just the fact that they're detained and it's harder to prepare their application. The case moves faster. It's more expensive to defend a deportation case. All of those reasons make it more likely that someone's going to be deported. So if you are arrested or your loved one is arrested for the suspicion of shoplifting, even before you're convicted of that, you can be detained by ICE. And under this new law, you would essentially be deported for shoplifting. So, estoy tratando de hacerlo en español. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to do it bilingual too, so I'm going to stop right here and do it in Spanish, and then I'll come back. Lo que estoy explicando es qué dice esa nueva ley. Todavía no es ley porque todavía está en proceso, pero imagino que pronto va a ser ley. Esa legislación de Laken Riley, que el señor que la mató era un inmigrante indocumentado, y ese señor, un joven de 26 años, de Venezuela, él había sido arrestado, no condenado, pero arrestado por robo menor. Creo que se dice hurto. Entonces, algo no muy serio, no muy grave, pero ahora se nota que esa legislación va a requerir que cualquier persona que tiene acusación de cualquier tipo de robo, sea serio o sea menor, como un hurto, va a ser sujeto a una detención mandatario, y que no va a poder sacar una fianza para salir a un centro de detención de inmigración. Y los que entienden el proceso de deportación y la detención de inmigración entienden que cuando alguien ya está en proceso de deportación, si está detenido, es más probable que va a ser deportado que las personas que no están detenidos. Primero, porque la detención es difícil y puede demorar mucho tiempo, y las personas que no quieren seguir detenidos, más probable van a aceptar una deportación. Pero igual también las personas que sí quieren pelear su caso, es más difícil pelear su caso cuando está detenido porque cuesta más, tienen menos tiempo porque va más rápido un caso cuando está detenido que cuando está afuera, y es más difícil prepararlo, tienen menos tiempo para una preparación buena. Entonces puede ser que en el futuro una persona que tiene cargos de hurto puede ser deportado, no por ser violento, nada de eso. Y lo que no entiendo yo es qué es la conexión, porque ahora han hecho una conexión entre personas arrestadas por hurto, y no para defender el hurto, pero imagino que personas de bajos recursos tienen más tentación de hurtar porque no tienen dinero para hacer compras. Entonces, ¿qué conexión hay entre el hurto, que es un robo menor, y un delito de violencia, como en este caso, como el asesino? Esto es algo que no entiendo. I'm also live on TikTok, so if anyone has any questions, I am available for that. Okay, so like I said, this legislation, it really doesn't make sense to me. Number one, because what connection is there between shoplifting and the likelihood that you're going to brutally murder someone? It doesn't make any sense to me. Number two, because there already are really strict really strict immigration consequences for theft in general. For example, a theft crime that has a value over $10,000 is an aggravated felony. So that's going to disqualify you from pretty much anything, any ways to stop a deportation. A theft crime is also a crime involving moral turpitude, which is also going to, so aggravated felony, you're definitely not, you're going to be subject to mandatory detention anyways with an aggravated felony. And also with a crime involving moral turpitude, a CIMT, you're not going to be eligible for bond either. You're going to be subject to mandatory detention. So all of those theft crimes already have mandatory detention. The only one in theft that doesn't is the shoplifting, because there's an exception for that. Even though it is a crime of theft, it could be considered a crime involving moral turpitude, but because it usually has a low penalty, it's usually subject to an exception. So again, the connection that they're making is that this 26-year-old Venezuelan immigrant who was arrested for shoplifting later brutally murdered this 22-year-old college student. And so if we want to stop murders, apparently we need to penalize shoplifters or stop shoplifters before they get to murderers. That's what's confusing to me, because like I said, all of the other theft crimes, they're already going to be subject to mandatory detention. Shoplifting is the only one that's eligible for an exception that could get a bond. Is anybody else tracking with this? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. But it's clear that the connection is very clear that that these legislators, and it was pretty, it wasn't close. It wasn't a close vote. It was like 251 said yes, 170 said no. So it's clear that there is strong support for legislation that will detain and deport violent crimes, which, yeah, I get it. Definitely, if this person murdered this young woman, like, definitely he should be tried, and if he's convicted of it, then yes, he should be deported for the crime of violence. But to say that there's some connection between shoplifting that he did in the past, alleged shoplifting, because I don't think he was even convicted of it. He ended up not going to court, which you can have a failure to appear for a number of different reasons. Maybe he didn't know, maybe he got confused about the hearing date, or it could be that, like, he didn't go on purpose. Maybe, that is an option too. But the likelihood, it's more likely that he just didn't know he needed to go back, or that he was afraid of getting deported for shoplifting, which now, under the Laken Riley Act, is a valid fear. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions here on Facebook, or sorry, on TikTok. I don't see any questions there. Entonces, lo que estamos platicando, estoy explicando qué va a suceder cuando esta legislación empieza como ley, que va a ser, creo que pronto, porque acaba de pasar por la Casa de Representantes el 7 de enero, y todavía falta pasar por el Senado y ser firmado por el presidente, pero creo que va a ser pronto que eso va a suceder, porque es obvio que el público, que el país tiene deseo de proteger sus ciudadanos, que está bien, y que creen que hay muchos inmigrantes indocumentados que están cometiendo delitos de violencia, que no es verdad, pero eso es su opinión. Y en este caso de Laken Riley, lo que sucedió fue que un inmigrante indocumentado de Venezuela, un joven de 26 años, la mató, y él había sido arrestado por hurto, un robo muy menor. y él no se había presentado en corte. Entonces, esta nueva ley va a requerir que inmigración detiene sin opción de fianza a una persona que tiene cargos, no convicción, solo cargos de hurto. Y eso es lo que no entiendo. ¿Cómo se puede justificar que una persona con un cargo de hurto debe de ser detenido con inmigración sin opción de fianza? Esto va a decir que va a ser casi seguro que personas arrestados por hurto, cargados por hurto, van a ser deportados. Y solo por el hecho, imagínense, si ese señor no hubiera tenido un arresto de hurto, digamos, tal vez arresto de posesión de drogas o algo así, que tal vez esa ley iba a ser conectado con ese tipo de delito. Entonces, eso es lo que no entiendo. Porque también para explicar que los casos de inmigración, cuando alguien está detenido por inmigración, se tiene que explicar por qué merece salir bajo fianza y ciertos delitos le hace descalificado por la salida bajo fianza. Y normalmente el robo es uno de ellos que puede afectar el poder salir bajo fianza. Porque si es un robo con valor más de 10,000, eso es una felonía agravada. Y por seguro no va a poder salir bajo fianza cuando tiene una felonía agravada. También los casos de robo normalmente son delitos de mala conducta moral. Esto también quiere decir que no va a calificar para fianza para salir de detención, de inmigración. Luego también el hurto es un tipo de robo, pero normalmente es un tipo de robo menor y hay una excepción cuando es un delito menor. Y por eso normalmente se puede salir bajo fianza si alguien tiene un delito de hurto. Y incluso también, normalmente cuando alguien tiene un arresto de hurto, no está luego, o sea, inmediatamente agarrada por inmigración y detenido y procesado para deportación, porque es un delito menor. ¿Cuántos conocen a alguien que fue arrestado por hurto? Es un delito muy común y un delito que afecta normalmente, más que nada, afecta a personas de bajos recursos porque necesitan hacer compras, pero no pueden pagar para sus compras. Entonces, es un delito que normalmente afecta a personas que son de bajos recursos. Pero ahora vemos que este país quiere hacer deportaciones, quiere hacer la situación más difícil para personas indocumentadas y ahora se van a hacer conexiones, un delito menor con otro delito grave de asesino en esta situación, para poder justificar la deportación y la detención y la deportación de indocumentados. So we're talking about the Laken Riley Act that passed the House yesterday, January 7th. It will likely pass the Senate soon and then be signed by the president into law, whether that's Biden or Trump when he takes office in 12 days. Excuse me, I've explained the justification, the basis for it. It does seem a little strange that this is like the first bill that's being passed right now in 2025. So why focus on immigrants who have been charged with shoplifting? How is that a priority? And we see from this, number one, we see that there's already changes that are being made to immigration, even though we're still about 2 weeks out from Trump taking office. But we've already been seeing, the movement in that direction, whether this bill is signed into law by Biden or whether it's signed by Trump, whoever. We see already this trend towards fulfilling Trump's promise to rid the country of violent, undocumented immigrants. And in order to do that, there's had to be this blanket, like, I'm at a loss for words today because I just don't really understand why we're here. But this false belief that immigrants are not only stealing our jobs, they're not only stealing our resources, but now they're murdering everyone, right? And eating our cats and our dogs. Let's not forget about that one. And it's just not true. The studies that have been, the statistics that have been run, the percentage of immigrants who commit violent crimes versus the percentage of the rest of the population, the percentages are just much, much higher. And I think it's always made sense to me. Like, why would someone endanger their livelihood, their status? If you're in a country where you do not have status, you're more likely to want to stay under the radar and avoid arrest, because that arrest is more likely to result in your deportation. So this whole, misconception that immigrants commit more serious crimes than U.S. citizens, it's just not true. Jay Magana, you have a question. Can you get deported if you have a work permit to work in the U.S.? And that depends, because even permanent residents can get deported. So anyone with any status that is less than U.S. citizen can be deported. And even U.S. citizens can be deported. I worked on the border for 6 years when I first became an attorney, and I represented several U.S. citizens who were detained in immigration detention centers, who didn't know that they were U.S. citizens, but they actually were U.S. citizens, not by birth, obviously, because somebody would know if they had a U.S. Birth certificate, but people who were, oh, my live is lagging. I'm sorry about that. People who were U.S. citizens who through like their parents or something like that, that they were detained, and many U.S. citizens have been deported because they didn't know that they were U.S. citizens and because of certain crimes. So to answer your question, Jay Macania, yes, you can still be deported if you have violated either your visa, you've violated not necessarily your work permit, but some work visas require you to work only in that job. So if you've violated your visa or you've committed a certain crime, even if you haven't been convicted, you can still be taken to immigration detention and to see an immigration judge, and then they will decide whether or not you will be deported. Thank you for that question, Jay Magana. Hopefully my internet's not lagging too much and you understood that. I'm open to hearing any questions that you have. También estoy contestando preguntas si tiene preguntas. Hoy estamos platicando sobre el Laken Riley Act. Esto va a ser ley muy pronto. Está en proceso de ser ley, pero va a afectar personas que están arrestados, están cargados con un delito de hurto. Algo muy menor. Y esto es la locura donde estamos ahorita en este tiempo en nuestro país, donde estamos haciendo leyes para castigar a personas sospechadas de hurto. Y es porque un hombre, un joven indocumentado, fue arrestado por hurto y luego asesinó, mató a otra joven de 22 años. Entonces, ahora hay una conexión entre el hurto y el asesino. Qué locura. All right. So anyone who has been arrested or charged, not even convicted, of shoplifting under this Laken Riley Act, once it becomes law, that person will be ineligible for receiving a bond. A bond is a payment that you make. And so anyone who's detained for any reason, it happens in the criminal context, but also I'm talking about it in the immigration context. If you're detained, an immigration judge has to decide whether you should be released, usually with a payment to make sure that you're actually going to come back to court, because if you don't go back to court, you lose that payment. So it's like a way to secure that you're going to return to court. And so an immigration judge has to review your case. If you ask for it, you have to first request a bond hearing for the judge to decide whether or not you are eligible for a bond and how much that bond is going to be. And so anyone with certain crimes can be disqualified from being able to get an immigration bond. For example, if you have an aggravated felony, which is why this, like I said, I'm trying to wrap my head around this and understand this situation, because why does Congress not understand immigration? And I guess that's a given, because like nobody understands immigration unless you're an immigration attorney. This is like the second most complex area of law, second to tax law only. But so it's just clear they don't understand immigration law, because anyone with a serious theft offense is not going to be eligible for a bond, because an aggravated felony, a theft offense over like $10,000 is going to make it an aggravated felony, and aggravated felons cannot be released from immigration detention on a bond. And anyone who has less than that, it's still going to be considered a crime involving moral turpitude, and that's a CIMT, and those are not eligible for bond either. So the only theft type that wasn't previously already subject to mandatory detention was shoplifting. And just, lo and behold, this murderer, this guy that murdered the poor girl in Georgia, the 22-year-old, while she was running, he just so happened to have an arrest for shoplifting. So why didn't they just say, this is what makes it clear, either that they don't understand immigration law, or that they don't want to look like they are, or they think that the rest of America doesn't know immigration law. Anyway, regardless, like the only people that this, actually, no, I take that back. So the people that this will impact are shoplifters and anyone accused of a theft crime, because those other previously, sometimes I have to talk things out. I don't know if you guys are like that too, but sometimes things are just like a little complicated. So as I'm rambling through this, now I'm realizing this will impact anyone who is charged with a theft crime. So anyone with a theft crime over 10,000, you have to be convicted of it to be an aggravated felon. And anyone with a less theft serious crime, you have to be convicted of it in order to have it be a crime involving moral turpitude. So this will impact people who previously were not subject to mandatory detention, was shoplifters, and anyone who has just been charged with any theft crime. So I don't know if you followed me, but I feel like I just had a light bulb moment, and that's who this is going to impact. Anyone who has any kind of theft arrest, from shoplifting to grand theft auto or, beyond. All of those individuals, if they are undocumented, they will go to immigration detention, and they will be there until they either win a case, which is very unlikely, or they're deported. And that's who this is going to impact. I think the justification for it and the logic behind it is still really funny, strange to me. And again, I don't want to make light of this woman's murder. It's horrible. What happened to her family, her friends. I definitely can empathize with that and understand why so many people rallied around this. But I think what we need to be careful about and ask ourselves is, are we taking this out of context and acting like this is happening all day, every day, that undocumented immigrants are murdering people all day, every day? And the answer is no, it's not. So now, because of this one isolated incident where a murderer just so happened to previously be arrested for shoplifting, now anyone with any theft arrest or charge is going to be in immigration detention until they're deported, basically. We're 10 days away from Trump 2.0. I had to take a little time off. I don't know if you guys noticed I was gone for a little bit. Took some time off at the holidays, but also just needed to recenter, regroup, because this is going to be hard. It's already starting to be hard. It's already going to be impacting people, immigrants, their families, their children, their spouses, their employers. We're all going to be impacted by this, guys. And I think that that's what people have not really appreciated, have not been able to see, is that immigrants are the backbone of our country. And making these changes, making it harder for immigrants to get status, making it easier for ICE to deport people, it's going to affect all of us. So buckle up and hold on. Tuve que hacer un breve descanso. Tomé unas vacaciones por las días feriadas, pero también tenía que respirar y pensar en cómo vamos cómo vamos a sobrevivir los próximos 4 años. Y estoy de regreso, estoy lista para empezar, para ayudar. Y espero que todos entiendan que todos vamos a ser afectados. Los inmigrantes, las familias de los inmigrantes, todos vamos a ser impactados. Las comunidades, los empleadores, lo que este país no se ha entendido es de que los inmigrantes son el base de nuestro país, de nuestras comunidades. Entonces, todos vamos a ser afectados y espero que estén listos. Llámanos si tienen preguntas, 541-653-8899. Please give us a call if you or someone you love is likely to be impacted by this new legislation, which is going to be anyone who's undocumented, basically, because let's just think about it. Let's think about like the worst case scenario. You're someone who is biased towards immigrants and thinks that everyone who doesn't speak their language or who has a different shade of skin is an undocumented immigrant. And let's just think if that person, let's call her Karen, was at Walmart and heard someone speaking another language or saw someone with a different shade of skin, and accused that person of shoplifting. And I don't know. I mean, I suppose they would, hopefully they would review the cameras and confirm that wasn't true. But let's say like maybe it was the kid put something in a pocket or a purse or something. And now that individual is going to be arrested for shoplifting. And because of this law, ICE is going to be required to detain them and to keep them detained until it's decided whether they can stay here legally or be deported. I can see that going really badly. And hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully that's just my paranoia. But this is going to impact anyone who is here undocumented, whether you are in trouble or staying out of trouble. That's what it's going to impact. So make sure that you have talked with an immigration attorney, see if there are any options for legalizing your status now. We are happy to help. Give us a call, 541-653-8899. I hope everyone stays well and is safe. We will talk to everybody soon.